Welcome to the Arts Alliance webinar on the Cook County Arts Nonprofit Relief Grant Program. My name is Jess Schwab. I use she, her pronouns, and really excited to be here with all of you today virtually presenting this webinar along with my colleagues, Megan Lewis and Jonna Schultz. I'll introduce in just a moment. This nonprofit relief grant program is currently underway and has started accepting applications as of a week ago today from eligible nonprofits located and providing programming in suburban Cook County. The reason we're doing this webinar today is to help you understand eligibility requirements, what kinds of documentations are needed for the application, and the timing and the process of grant awards. So we will have time at the end for questions. If you all are familiar, or even if you're new to Zoom webinar features, there's also a Q&A where you can enter questions throughout. We really encourage you to use that as well if there are burning questions that you have. And we are going to get into all of the nitty gritty of the grant itself. But before we do that, we want to briefly go over who we are as Arts Alliance and our role in this program. So let's go to the next slide. Great. So many of you may be familiar, may be members of Arts Alliance Illinois. For those of you who maybe it's your first time joining us for some programming, Arts Alliance Illinois is a statewide nonprofit organization with the mission of building the creative sector's power through advocacy, policy change, and connection to resources so that we can improve the quality of life in communities across Illinois. Our membership is composed of artists, arts educators, advocates, nonprofit arts and culture organizations, and for-profit creative arts businesses. The team here at Arts Alliance, including myself, I introduced myself just a couple of minutes ago. I'm Jess Schwab. I am our public funding communications manager, and I'm really excited to be a part of a team at Arts Alliance that is focused on connecting creatives with public funding. So the rest of that team includes Casey Smith, our director of programs and special projects. Megan Lewis and Jonna Schultz are incredible public funding navigators. We also have some external partners who support us with nonprofit and grant maker advisory services. So we just want to shout out Chris Johnson with Lawyers for the Creative Arts and Jillian Gora with BDO. We've been expanding our work helping artists and creatives successfully apply for public grants. And a really big part of that work is our help desk, which some of you may have visited, where you can submit questions about public funding, specific grants like this Cook County grant we're going to be talking about today, or more general questions about resources to help grow your creative business or nonprofit. And we're just really excited about the help desk, about this work in general. We're going to expand it a lot more over the coming year. And we also intend to launch a series of informational webinars, kind of workshops to further strengthen the arts and culture sector. So stay tuned for that. But right now, the reason that many of you all are here today is we are focusing our resources on this new grant program from Cook County Arts. So let's get started talking a little bit about that. And I will pass it over to Megan, who will share an overview of our grant program that we're talking about today.
Great. Thanks, Jess. So today we're going to talk about Cook County Arts, and the intent of this grant program is to provide up to $1.5 million in unrestricted relief grants to nonprofit arts and culture organizations that are located in suburban Cook County. Now, as many of us know, the arts and culture sector was among the hardest hit industries in the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've seen that organizations are still facing significant ongoing operational challenges as a result of that. So this grant program is designed to provide some needed relief to arts and culture organizations in suburban Cook County to help them thrive in the post-pandemic economy. And there's 3 organizations that are involved with this grant program. First off is Cook County. Their Bureau of Economic Development, which is piloting this grant program, is part of their American Rescue Plan funding that they've received. Next is Allies for Community Business, or A4CB. They are the third party that's managing the grant applications. And just a little bit about them, A4CB supports small businesses and entrepreneurs throughout Chicagoland to help them grow and thrive. In Arts Alliance, we're working as a partner to Cook County, and we're providing specific support to the creative sector through our help desk and through weekly meetings that we're having with the county. So for this grant program, the grant amounts are either $5,000 or $10,000, and the amount you may be awarded depends upon your total expenses in fiscal year 2019. So if your total expenses were at least 20,000 and no more than 100,000, you may qualify for a $5,000 grant. If your total expenses were more than 100,000, then you may qualify for a $10,000 grant. In the case where your organization was started between January 1st, 2019 and March 11th, 2020, A4CB will look at your total expenses on your first 990 filing. Now, regarding the use of these funds, this is an unrestricted grant, which means that use of these funds is not limited to one program or project. However, you must use the funds in a way that advances the organization's mission. And they are grant funds, so they do not need to be repaid. And for this program, there are no reporting requirements. Now I'm going to pass it on over to Jana, who's going to review the eligibility criteria for this program.
Thanks, Megan. So when it comes to eligibility, Cook County has 5 criteria that must be met. First, you have to have an active status with the Illinois State Secretary's website, and you can check it at the blue link there. Next, you need to have been in operation before March 12th of 2020 and have maintained your operation through the time of this application. The third is that your primary address must be in suburban Cook County. If your address is in Chicago, you're not eligible for this program. Fourth, your operating budget must be a minimum of $20,000. And finally, your primary mission must be to provide arts and cultural activities or services for the public in suburban Cook County. Note, if you received PPP, SVOG, or B2B grants in the past, you're still eligible for this grant program. So, suburban Cook County nonprofit art organizations. These have been called out particularly because the city of Chicago has already provided funding for arts organizations in the city proper. So this is an opportunity to call out and support these specific organizations. Eligible artistic disciplines include the creative placemaking, cultural heritage and history, dance, design, fashion design, film, folk and traditional arts and crafts, humanities, literary arts, multiple disciplinary arts, music, media arts, performance arts, theater, and the visual arts. And now I'm going to hand it back to Megan, who's going to talk about what's required next.
Great. Thanks, Jana. So for the application itself, there's just a few pieces of information that's required for everyone. First is your federal employer identification number, or your EIN. Next, you need to provide a copy of the front and the back of a government issued photo ID of either the officer or the trustee that is listed on your 990 or your AG 990. Third is your organization's tax return for fiscal year 2019. Now, if you started your organization between January 1, 2019 and March 11, 2020, you can use your first 990 filing. And for any organizations that file the 990N or the e-postcard, you'll provide your annual report. The final item you need is a bank statement from a current bank account. This needs to be for the account where the funds would be deposited if you're awarded a grant. Now, this is not to see your balance, it's just so they can get your routing and your account numbers. Optional information you may provide, but you're not required to, includes a work sample if it's not clear from your other information that you are an organization with arts and culture programming. Now, the process of starting an application is very easy. You go to Cook County's programs website, www.cookcountyarts.org. When you get there, you'll see what appears on the slide, and the link for the application is in the upper right-hand corner of the page, which there's a circle around that. Once you click on that, then you'll see this page. This is where the application is. On the left-hand side is the list of required documents. And if you look to the bottom of it, there's a place where you can click in case you need to have a Spanish language version of it. Now, some tips to make the process go as smoothly as possible. First, we recommend that you gather all of your required documents and information before you get started. It's important to do this because the platform that's being used cannot save your information. So once you start the application process, you may time out if you navigate away from it for too long. So make sure you have that information in case you have to fill it in again. Secondly, also have the contact information ready for both the person filling out the application and the backup person. This is who would be reached if there's any questions and the main person is not available. And we strongly encourage you to select the box next to send me a copy of my responses, and you'll see that at the bottom of the application. This will prompt you to enter an email address and then ensure that you have a copy of your application for your files. And for this grant, all applicants who meet eligibility requirements and apply within the application window will be considered for a grant. Now, as Jess mentioned, this program's been open for a little while, and we've already started getting some questions at the help desk that we wanted to share with you. So I'm going to pass it off to Jess, who's going to walk us through what sort of things we've been hearing.
Great. And just a reminder, I see folks are already putting stuff in the Q&A. That's great. We're going to take some time at the end to go over participant questions, but right now we just want to go through some common questions we're seeing as this application has started to roll out. So the first up is where to find your fiscal year 2019 total expenses. Megan, can you answer this one?
Sure. Yeah, so this depends on which type of tax return that you file. So if we could go to the next screen, if you file a 990 tax return, you're going to find this number on line 18, which is noted by the arrow on there. If you're an organization that files the 990EZ, then you're going to find it on line 17 of the form. And if you're a nonprofit that files the Form 990N or the e-postcard, your total expenses are going to be on line O of the AG 990 annual report. And this is the document that you will be uploading in place of a 990 in the grant application. Now, since organizations that have income of less than 50,000 are filing this type of tax return, just remember that your total expenses must be at least 20,000 to be able to qualify for this grant.
Great. Thanks, Megan. Another question we're seeing a lot is due to the circumstances of this grant, right? So we know a lot of organizations paused their programming for a period during the pandemic in 2020, some in 2021. So Jonna, can you talk about how it works if an organization had to pause programming for a bit?
So if an organization did have to pause their programming, they are still eligible for this grant if they have maintained their 501c3 status and they are currently in operation.
Thanks, Jonna. I see a couple of folks in the Q&A are already sort of asking questions about this, but this is about eligibility. We're hearing a lot of questions about where an organization's primary business address might be and who they serve. We know there are organizations that are in suburban Cook County, but might provide programming outside of that area. So questions about whether those kinds of organizations are still eligible. And Jonna, I'll just pass it right back to you.
Thanks, Jess. This is a good question. So in order to be eligible, your work needs to benefit the public in the suburban Cook County. While your programming may be accessible to communities outside of suburban Cook County, your primary audience for your public programming must be residents of suburban Cook County.
Thanks, Jonna. Another question we're hearing is about sort of the documentation for this grant. The grant program does require a government issued ID to be uploaded. So Megan, can you just walk us through sort of acceptable forms of what's considered government issued ID?
Sure. So for this program, It accepts what we would commonly consider being a government ID, like your driver's license or your passport, the state ID, or a permanent resident card. But also included in this is the Real ID, the Chicago City Key ID, Consular ID, Military ID, Green Card, Certificate of Naturalization, Certificate of U.S. Citizenship, and Native American Tribal Photo ID. Now, as I mentioned earlier, just remember that you're going to need to upload a picture of both the front and the back of the ID into the application. And you can use any of these IDs, even if they're expired. Any expired IDs will be accepted.
Great. Thanks, Megan. You mentioned as well that the grant applications cannot be saved. So what happens if someone makes a mistake and they already submitted the application? Can they fix it? What does someone do in that case?
Yeah, so yes, a mistake on a submitted application can be fixed. So when I mentioned before, making sure and sending a copy of what you submitted to yourself, you're going to want to look at that copy and make sure that everything is correct. And if you find something that you need to fix, unfortunately, because you can't save your application, you'll need to go back to the application portal, open up a new application, and then work through the process of applying again with the accurate information. And just so that you have some assurance, when you go through this, the grant administrator, A4CB, is going to be reviewing only the most recent applications for your organization. So the first application that had the mistake in it will now be void. And again, I'm going to mention it one more time. Remember to check that box next to send me a copy of my responses. It's just above the blue submit button so that you can make sure and get a copy of everything you've submitted emailed to you so you can review it, make sure it's correct, and be able to go back and change anything that might have been wrong.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. So just a reminder, I see a lot of questions in the chat. Please continue to put questions in the Q&A, and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. We're going to spend this next part just going over briefly the application review and approval process. I'll pass it back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Jess. Allies for Community Business will be accepting applications. Right now, they're accepting them now up until the application window closes on February 29th at midnight. After that time, they'll review all the applications to ensure that the applicants meet the eligibility requirements. And just to make sure everyone understands, if you do provide your work sample or anything else about your work, there will not be a qualitative judgment made on the artistic merit of any applicant's public programs. So then after that window closes, all the applications will be assigned a random lottery number, and then they will be reviewed in lottery order. And in the instance, if a total pool of eligible applicants exceeds the available funding, then organizations that are located in HUD qualified census tracts and organizations with total expenses under 2 million will be reviewed first. If you are awarded the grant, you'll be asked to electronically sign a W-9 tax form and securely log into your business bank account as you normally would through your bank's website. Once you've completed these two steps, A4CB will initiate a funds transfer for the grant. You should then expect to receive the funds in 1 to 2 business days. So for more help with your grant application, we recommend that you check out the Cook County Relief Grants FAQs on their site. We've also provided a link to the Secretary of State's page where you can see the status of your organization. And you can always reach out to us at Arts Alliance through the help desk. Tickets can be submitted 24/7, but expect responses from us during normal business hours. So applications are open. They close February 29th at 11:59 p.m. And grant awards are anticipated to be made in mid-2024. I'm going to pass it over to Jess to talk about any questions that we have.
Great. So the first one, we did answer it, but I just wanted to say out loud for everyone. I know this is a lot of information. We have some great questions we're going to get to in this Q&A section. Just a reminder to everyone that our webinar is being recorded and that all of our webinars are available on the Arts Alliance YouTube channel, as well as we're going to be reposting them on our social media accounts. We'll also be having further webinars throughout the grant period over the next month. So if you know of other folks who maybe have similar or different questions or you think might be eligible, we'll definitely be sharing information about how you can share the word about those. So, if you're still intaking a lot of information, no worries. You'll be able to access all this information at a later date. And as Megan said, you can always come to us at the help desk and ask follow-up questions as well. I'm going to try to group the questions that we've got because I see some similarities, but let's start with a pretty straightforward one. So we have one person in our webinar who's asking, total expenses only includes actual cash. Megan or Jonna, how should we answer this question? What kind of constitutes total expenses?
Well, I can take that one. I mean, it is the number that appears on that total expense line on your tax return. So whatever is considered to be part of that accounting, that would be considered to be your total expenses.
And if you have any trouble finding that again, we do have photos on this webinar of sort of where that line is on your tax returns. And again, you can always come to us at the help desk if you're still having trouble locating that. I'm seeing a couple questions about IDs. One person has asked whether the 990 form signed by a former president who's no longer a part of the organization is going to present a problem because that person can't be the person who takes a picture of their ID. So does the person taking the ID photo and uploading that front and back need to be the same person who signs that 990?
Johnny, you want to take that one?
Sure. So the ID that you upload needs to be someone, one of the officers from your organization that is listed on the 990. And we have heard that sometimes people have rolled off of that. And so you'll want your most recent. If you have other questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out because we can get into the specifics of that. And another pro tip, Megan sure hit it, but I'm going to encourage folks, remember the front and the back of those IDs. So yeah, reach out to the help desk with specific situations and we can help guide those conversations.
Great. Another ID question I'm seeing in the chat is about the process of live credentialing, where the person filling out the form actually has to be showing a picture of the ID on their camera. And the person filling out the form has to be the same person as the driver's license. Is that something that this application requires?
I don't believe that the person who is filling out the form has to be the same person whose ID is being provided, because the ID is being provided by whoever is the board chair or the executive director. And it's quite common that there might be somebody else who's actually filling out this form online. So it's primarily to be able to reconcile whoever it is who's considered to be the leader or the decision maker for the organization.
Great. Okay, just a couple more questions here. And again, please feel free to, if other questions are coming up as we're answering them, throw them in the Q&A. There are no stupid questions. I see someone asking about whether arts organizations that are part of a larger parent organization, if they're eligible. Do we have an answer on that front?
Well, I think I'm going to say it depends, because if this is an organization that is based in suburban Cook County and they're part of a larger organization that's based in Chicago, we might need to review that a little bit more closely to understand what that relationship is. If both organizations are in suburban Cook County, I would say that probably they're eligible and there wouldn't be too many issues about it.
Great. I'm seeing another question in the Q&A about annual expenses. So someone asks, in regards to minimum $20,000 of annual expenses for very small organizations that have been operational but mostly on a free basis, i.e. free programming, partnering, and bartering with other creatives, are we still eligible? Can we guesstimate what those expenses would have been had we not partnered for free programming and services?
Jess, thanks for highlighting that question. This is the minimum is the $20,000, but we are taking that feedback. So we're really grateful to have that, to be able to share with the funder and just express those concerns as we move forward with this. So the bottom line is it is $20,000 expenses, but we really appreciate knowing where our organizations are coming from.
Awesome. A couple more questions in the chat about tax documents. One person asks, are the 2019 tax documents for the 2019 tax year or the organization's 2019 fiscal year?
Yeah, that's actually a question I just got this morning in the help desk. And it's very tricky because when you're talking about fiscal years, you're actually capturing data from the year before the fiscal year you're talking about. So a lot of nonprofits have a fiscal year that starts July 1st and ends June 30th. So for that, the fiscal year 2019 would be July 1, 2018 to June 30, 2019. And then it would be the tax document that would be produced with that information in it.
Great. I also see a couple other questions. So one is one that we've answered earlier in the presentation, but just bears repeating. So someone's asking, if an organization is determined to be eligible, how is the amount of the grant determined? So can we just go over the award amounts and how that's determined?
Sure. I am going to jump back in my slides so I can make sure and get that information correctly. But the two grant amounts are the 5,000 and the 10,000, and it depends on what your expenses are. So if you are an organization that has expenses for fiscal year 2019 that are between 20,000 and 100,000, then you qualify for the $5,000 grant. If you're an organization that has expenses that were more than 100,000, then you would qualify for the $10,000 grant.
Great. Let's take this one next. There's a question about 501c3 status. So does being in operation since 2020 mean having a 501c3 since 2020, or in operation since 2020 and currently have 501c3 status?
Okay, let's see if I understand this. So an organization needs to have been established as a 501c3 as of March 12th, 2020. To have maintained your status means that you did not become ineligible or inactive based on the Secretary of State's website, because every year a nonprofit has to submit an annual report to the Secretary of State's office. So what this means is that you were established in time to be eligible and that you maintained your status over time up till today. So you aren't delinquent with any of those reports to the Secretary of State's office. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Megan. Let's take a couple more here. So someone's asked if it might cause an issue if the organization is located in suburban Cook County, but the ID used for the application has a non-Cook County address.
I can take that one, Jess. I would just make sure that the ID is accurate, the front and the back, upload that through the process, and we'll be sure to reach out and let you know if there would be an issue, but I would assume not. as long as your organization and the programming it's providing is primarily for the public in suburban Cook County.
Great, thanks, Jonna. I do see another question about the sort of parent organization. If there's another kind of statement instead of a 990 that can be provided for just illustrating the financials of an organization. So I'm seeing someone ask about a P&L statement or just an alternative way to provide financials for an organization that has a parent org as well.
I'm not sure. We would need to reach out to the grant administrator to understand if we could provide something that's different. It depends. If you are a nonprofit organization, you should have a 990. Now, there are different kinds of organizations that provide different types of 990s. If you're a grant making foundation, you have a different 990. If you're a university based nonprofit, you would have a different 990. And I'm not sure about the eligibility of university based nonprofits for this program. We would need to look into that.
Great. So thanks for those questions, Leslie. We encourage you to reach out to us at the help desk as well, and we can look into that further as well. I see one more question in the chat. There's someone on the 990s, an ex-president of the organization who's moved out of state and no longer has an Illinois ID. Is that kind of ID something that would be acceptable for government issue ID for this grant?
Jonna, what do you think?
I think I'm so glad. I think this person was going to put it in a help desk email. So thank you for that. I want to look into that specifically. That's kind of a challenging one. And I'd want to make sure that we're giving our grant administrator the information that they need to make the best decision, and also giving the organization the chance as well. So maybe there's someone else on one of those 990s that we could use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for all of these really great questions. Just a reminder that if there's something that you still are confused about or have questions, our help desk is here. You can visit us at support.artsalliance.org. This webinar will be uploaded again to our Arts Alliance Illinois social media and YouTube channels. We really encourage you to share it with your networks. If there are other suburban Cook County nonprofit organizations in the arts and culture world you think might be eligible or interested in applying for this grant, we want to try to make sure as many eligible organizations as possible apply. And our job as Arts Alliance Illinois is to support you throughout this application process and answer any questions you might have. So thank you all so much for coming today. Thank you all so much for your great questions. We look forward to seeing you at the help desk or at a future webinar.